Hey, let's build a mallet. For the first step, let's break down some wood. When I build my mallets, I like to use the hardest pieces of scrap wood that I can find. I had a bunch of red oak laying around that I'm never going to use, and I have what I believe to be babinga that a friend gave to me. I don't have a project for it specifically, and he gave me quite a bit, so I'm going to use it for this mallet. I'm pretty fast and loose with the dimensions on these mallets because they're just really a fun project and the dimensions don't really matter, but just so you have a point of reference, this mallet is about 6 inches long and 3 inches tall, and the thickness is about 2 3/4 of an inch thick. Be sure to orient your cuts so that end grain is what's used for your striking surface. Edge grain and face grain just aren't nearly as strong. I like my handles to be about 10 or 11 inches long. Here I'm cutting down a piece of beech down to just over 11 inches. Next I took the handle stock down to the table saw and I ripped it down to 1 inch by 1 inch. Again, this is completely arbitrary. You can make this any size you want. With the rough sizes cut down, it's now time to start getting into the more intricate and specific cuts. There are going to be several pieces of the mallet during this build that have a miter cut on them, and they're all at the same angle, 3 degrees. Remember that. It's important. It's the only solid dimension that I use on every one of my mallet builds. Anything less than 3 degrees, it's too subtle, and anything more, it's just too drastic. You'll see what I mean. So here I'm marking up the middle layer of the mallet head. This piece is going to be cut in half to create a mortise. I'll explain it a little better here now. So we've got our headstock pieces cut. They are at the same dimensions and ready to go. This middle piece is going to have a hole cut here and a hole cut here. This is where the lead shot or the BBs will go that will give it its weight and its dead blow action. So you'll imagine this backer piece here, the holes will be here where the BBs will go in, and then this will actually be cut. This piece of where this mark is, there will be no wood. And this cut won't be a straight 90 degree like I have marked here. It'll actually come up at an angle and flare out at 3 degrees on both sides. That'll make it so that when the handle is in here and there's a kerf line cut in the handle, I can knock wedges in there and it'll spread this apart and it'll make it so the head will not fall off of the handle. This will make more sense down the road. Check it out. So I set my miter saw to 3 degrees and got to chopping. Like I said earlier, 3 degrees is the only thing you need to remember about this build. It's the most important thing. Every other dimension is entirely up to you. You can make this thing look however you want. After I removed the glue squeeze out with a chisel that made its way into the mortise while it was in clamps, I took the mallet head over to the bandsaw and removed the excess middle layer material. And then it's over to the drill press to hog out the material that makes the cavities for the BBs to sit in. This is an entirely optional step. You don't have to add this cavity and you don't have to add BBs, but I will say it really does add some weight and it gives the mallet really nice dead blow action. Once the glue is all dried and the mallet is out of clamps, I like to take it over to the jointer and joint the top and bottom of it, referencing the same face for both sides. And if you don't have a jointer, it's not a big deal. This step is not necessary. You just want to make it look as flat as you can. It doesn't have to actually be flat. There are a million ways you can accomplish this, but the simplest way would be to just sand it down. Then it's back over to the miter saw to recut the 3-degree angle on the striking face of the mallet. This helps eliminate any imperfections or slippage that occurred during the glue up. And you don't need to do this now. You can do this at any point during the build, as long as you do it before you get the finish on. So since we just made a mortise in our headstock, we're going to take our handle stock and we're going to turn this into a tenon. There's a ton of ways to make tenons. The best way is on a table saw. You can do it with a tenoning jig, or you can use a miter gauge and a dado stack. But that's when you need a perfect mortise and tenon. For these mallets, you don't need a perfect mortise and tenon. In fact, because we're going to be putting wedges in the tenon, by nature we don't need it to be perfect. We actually need play in there to knock the wedges in for the wedges to work. So when you're doing a quick and dirty tenon, I like to use my bandsaw. And also, when I don't have to do math, it's even better. So I like to take my piece of wood and I mark a rough line on where I need that tenon to hit, and I'll mark a line on the piece of wood where I need my shoulder to be, and I'll cut it on the bandsaw. I'll show you what that looks like right now. Whenever I'm cutting tenons on my bandsaw, I'm always just sneaking up on the cut. So I like to keep my mortise nearby so I can constantly test my tenon to see if it fits in there or not. And here I'm cutting a kerf line into the tenon. This is where the wedges will be knocked in. These holes at the base of the kerf line make it easier for the wood to spread apart when you knock in the wedges. So on my handles, I like to add a chamfer. It makes it so it's more comfortable when you're holding it. It's not so rough. It doesn't hurt your hands as much. But I don't want the chamfer to be down the whole length of the exposed handle. So I like to set stops. And what I usually do is I just reference my radius here. So it stops, it's just barely touching that. I set my stop down here. And then over here, I do the same thing. The end of it is barely touching this radius here for the dust port, and I set my stop down here. So check it out. I cut my wedges on my bandsaw, but you could do this on a table saw, a miter saw, or with a handsaw. If you had to choose between any of the other three options, table saw, miter saw, or handsaw, I would definitely say do it with a handsaw, because the miter saw and the table saw could get pretty dangerous making these cuts. And for the dry fit. Now you're probably asking yourself, why is he using these two random pieces of wood to knock these wedges in when there's a mallet right over there? Well, that's a super great question. Once you've knocked the wedges in as far as they'll go, go grab a saw. In this case, I grabbed a flush trim, but you can grab any saw and cut off the excess wedge material. This is going to look so cool once you have it all flushed up. It's so rewarding seeing those wedges knocked in. This is one of my favorite joints. If you've made it this far, you've got a completed mallet. This step is purely cosmetic, but I think it really adds a lot to this thing. I like to take it over to the router table and add a chamfer around the whole perimeter of the headstock. You could add any edge treatment you want, round over, chamfer, whatever you want, as long as it's a chamfer. And finally, I sanded the mallet through all the grits, but I didn't think it was necessary to show you all those grits, so here's the final grit at 6 times speed. Alright, the mallet is complete. It is, however, not finished. I'm not going to show my finishing process on this video. That's not really important. There's multiple options out there for finishes. I really recommend something hard and durable like a lacquer or a poly. I'm going to use a gel poly for this by a company called Old Masters. I really like that stuff. Also, this mallet is a little bigger than my mallet that I have now, but that doesn't really matter because it's not actually for me. I'm going to be giving this away over on my Instagram channel. So if you wanted to go check out my page over there at Coffey Custom Builds, that would be awesome. And you can also see what this thing looks like with its finish on. It'll look really nice, I'm telling you right now. If you had any questions or any comments about this build, that'd be awesome if you could let me know down below in the comment section. I really hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching.